All right, we are live on YouTube.
Yes.
All right, let me. Okay. Anima Noira. That's how we say your name.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much for appearing on the new failed state update. We've been gone for a while. We're back, and the whole purpose of this show is really just like discussing what we call the culture of American decline. So, a friend of mine who was raised in the USSR actually coined that term. He moved to the United States when he was like a teenager, and he went back after the Soviet Union fell, and he was living in Russia. And after that, when he returned to the United States, he started seeing kind of precisely what was happening in the fall of the Soviet Union start to happen in the United States. And and I was just wondering, from your perspective, is it like, so you grew up in Prague, and how long have you been in the States?
I have been here for over a year. Like, I've been here before, but a year is when I moved here.
Okay. And do you see like kind of is it like deja vu being in the United States now compared to
I haven't gotten a deja vu. It's profoundly different, but I certainly have gotten a lot of shocking and surprising impressions that made me like draw comparisons to where I came from. A lot of and also being confronted like with the expectations versus reality. Like that has been a very hard fall. And it continues to be. I'm discovering an entirely different story for myself, and even with others who came here for the so-called American dream. And for many of us, it actually turned into the American nightmare. Like, there's a lot more people nowadays who are gonna openly tell you, like, why do you come here? Who would even want to be here?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you leave a place like Prague? And this just was not the case even just 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I was considering this move. Actually, it was always in the cards for me. Like, I always knew that was my destiny, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
But I almost came here in 2014. And like, what I can say is that every year has been progressively worse.
Really?
And like, this was the worst time to come to America. Like last year, it was just it was a nightmare. That the lockdowns were worldwide, and the way I was seeing it where I was like, you're gonna do it now, or maybe half a year from now, they will take our passports from us. They will institute the vaccine passports instead, some kind of total control of movement of population, which has actually been implemented partially.
Mm-hmm.
So the travel was severely restricted. There was people from all over the world being stuck in different places, and nobody cared if your father is dying or if you're visiting your spouse. People have just been like really oppressed in pretty cruel ways, and nobody knew how fast it was going to progress.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of made the decision to go now in about January, February last year. I was also seeing a lot of like unsustainable pressure on businesses. They basically all went belly up in my hometown. Everything was ordered closed by the government, but without any subsidies. You were basically deprived of making a living. Mm-hmm. From one day to another. And it went on for months. It went on for 2 years, maybe. Mm-hmm. So I was like, if they can do this to us, then what is the perspective in running a business? The prices are going to go up, which is exactly what happened. Prices of energy went up like 100% since I left. It doubled. Prices for heating your house have doubled. in Central Eastern Europe, which was never a very, I mean, it's been kind of a harsh place to live even before. Right now, with these price hikes, I honestly don't know how people are going to make it. So if you're selling anything that is not deemed like a life necessity kind of service, like alcohol, alcohol sales went up considerably, rehabs are full, domestic violence and child abuse went up during the lockdowns. So unless you're a war profiteering kind of business, then you're going to struggle, and you will always be faced with this fear, like, what if we are just ordered to be closed?
Right.
So, our witches' Sabbath became the illegal witches' Sabbath. Literally, the government was tracing people's cell phones, and if you would congregate in a number greater than 2, they were sending SWAT teams to ostensibly break into secret parties, because people were forbidden from congregating altogether, socializing, visiting family, freedom of religious worship, so it was entirely anti-constitutional. What I saw was unprecedented. Of course, the USA was in on it as well, but depending on the location, it was like still kind of more tolerable here. I would think so. So it was it was one of those life decisions that you have to make, or you feel like you have to make it, because you don't want to be like the people in 1944, 1945, or in the 30s, or in the 20s who just got stuck, on the wrong side of the border somewhere.
Yeah. And I want to get back to that, what you were just saying. It's really interesting, but I think we should kind of work up there from kind of where you got your start, because, I asked you before we started, should I introduce you as an occultist or a witch? And you were like, all of the above. So how do you end up, in the field or the pursuit of?
I've been in it since childhood. My father was an occultist, so like I was raised with it. It was my first and only profession. I never worked a day job. Like I became an entrepreneur in my early 20s. I was even like media famous. I got published. So I had my witchcraft studio, my offices, running workshops, serving people, doing divination. I had a witchcraft store. I was doing lectures, presentations, rituals for hire, the whole thing, that's been my life pretty much for 15 years.
And, I love America, but the one complaint that a lot of us have is there's no sense of history. People, it's such a young country that we think everything started in the 1700s. But
not even that. Las Vegas started in the 50s.
Exactly. Yeah. And it gets rebuilt every 20 years, So what's your perspective of a practitioner coming from a place with such a history, such like a rich and long history as Prague?
I actually prefer the American spirit, because people here are more spiritual. They're not stuck in the academic worldview. They are in it more for the practice. They found their own way into it. I actually came here for the left-hand path, like for the Black magicians, because this particular genre of the occult it's kind of an American thing, I guess, or like a Western thing, Scandinavian perhaps as well. Where I come from, it's kind of unheard of. Like there's very few practitioners. So I wanted to be among my people. That was one of the draws always.
Well, I guess this is probably an annoying question, but given our audience, maybe you should explain what the left-hand path is.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I didn't realize that's like this is a fairly fringe term. So the left-hand path is contrasted to the right-hand path, as in black and white magic. It is said to be like the sinister path. Many of these people will call themselves to be Luciferians. Satanists, black magicians. It actually originates from India, from Tantra. But even there, it has like this connotation of basically breaking social taboos, kind of living as a spiritual outlaw. It's the people who will eat the ashes of the dead and meditate in graveyards. They'll just do their own spiritual thing, kind of outside of the society, in defiance of society. So it's this like a lone wolf, warlock, magician archetype. It's a solitary path, decidedly, but we do congregate. Like, we're kind of drawn together by necessity, and we brush shoulders with pagans, of course, because many of us work with pagan gods. We brush shoulders with the New Agers, who are mostly more in the love and light, But basically, it's like the Western demonology grimoire tradition. That's what it's kind of built on. So it goes back to King Solomon and Babylon. It was forbidden, of course, throughout the history after Christianity took over. So it still carries this like a forbidden arts, dark arts. That's some other names that people will refer to it as.
Right. And one thing that I think a lot of these boundaries are really kind of blurred, and I think
absolutely.
And I get the impression, talking to a lot of people, not so many on the left-hand path, but people who would consider themselves on the right-hand path, and then, reading about the left-hand stuff, that like, it's really two sides of the same coin.
Oh, sure. It's just branding, it's just branding. And if you take, regardless of what path you take, if you're serious about it, you will arrive at the same conclusions. But I would also not say that these terms are like devoid of meaning, because many of us refer to ourselves as like the devil worshippers or witches, the heirs of the witches' Sabbath. So at the very least, I think it is to honor our ancestors and our predecessors who really suffered to keep those practices alive, who are persecuted, who did it all in darkness, when it was really dangerous.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think when things became popularized, just speaking as, in the United States, as things became kind of popularized, like kind of a more black and white meaning, like unnuanced view kind of took hold, where, you meet like New Age people are like, magic should only be used to expand your consciousness. If you try to, use it to get something, then you're like a black brother. Or like, even like Aleister Crowley, who, considered himself, the White Brotherhood, he considered himself as saying, all magic should be used in pursuit of, your true will. But if you actually read his diaries or whatever, he's
and if
always,
you look at his life, like he practiced animal sacrifice and he lived it up,
Yeah, and he's always like doing magic to get laid or to pay the rent.
They all do, they all do.
Yeah, but he justifies that as saying, well, because if I don't have an apartment, if I get kicked out of my apartment, I can't pursue my true will. There's
it is a constant battle between ideals and practice. And I would also say that, like, with these historical or even contemporary big figures, they are just like highly controversial, and it's a pure fantasy. It's a projection. People almost revere Crowley as a saint, kind of a demigod figure, which I personally don't get it. To me, people like Anton Sandor Lavey have done more good argumentation, more good writing, more job in actually founding something, bringing forth a philosophy that is still useful. who am I to judge? Like, who knows what people will say about Anima Noira 50 years from now or 100 years from now? My
Right.
writings might be rediscovered, and
Yeah. Well, that's the one thing that's really scary to me, is that everybody I know is writing, blogs or email newsletters or something. What if all the computers crash? Like, where's all our work going to be in 200 years? It's,
we don't know, that's
yeah.
the thing. Like, we use different media to preserve knowledge, and most of it has been lost. Like
Mm-hmm.
the stuff that's been preserved, it's kind of random.
Mm-hmm.
I have personally learned more about history from like past life regression that I've done than
Okay.
from history, because most history is unrecorded. It's written by the winners. It's all lies and propaganda.
What we're gonna work our way up to past live regression. I want to know what your kind of, you said you were raised in a family where this stuff was common. Kind of what were you doing as a younger person? How were you kind of experiencing it, and how were you exposed to it?
I was born in 1987, 2 years before the Iron Curtain fell. At that time, in the late 80s, were like a time of like a spiritual revival, sort of.
Mhm.
At that time, my parents actually met. They were match made in this spiritualist circle. The man who introduced them was known to be, he was a genius mathematician, a mystic. It was a group of practicing mystic yogis and Buddhists, and also the underground Catholic Church was playing into that. And he was believed to be a reincarnation of some ancient Egyptian high priest. So my parents actually believed that they were a couple before, and they
Mhm.
had like a sacred marriage sort of calling. They have both moved hundreds of miles into the capital city where they were introduced. And this man, then the high priest, he became my godfather. So I was swimming in these circles, since my early childhood, sort of. I mean, my father sort of considered me like a spiritual prodigy. Like,
Mhm.
he wanted me to develop these talents, these gifts. So I got my first tarot when I was 11. By age 13, I was fluent in astrology. My parents believed in like prophecy and power of prayer, manifestation of thoughts, interpreting of dreams. So I was kind of encouraged in this direction. Um, but like, you don't really appreciate things as a child.
Mhm.
So I thought my father was just like a bogus hippie with a lot of crazy stories, with a wild imagination. I wasn't buying into the past life stuff at all. I
Mhm.
thought that was just something he used to, you know like, to bluff with women and pull wool over their eyes.
Mhm.
But 20 years later, it dawned on me that like they were entirely correct in what they said, what they felt, because I saw it. Like, I saw my parents together before, and even they were my parents before.
Mhm.
Like, this whole setup has been recreated a bunch of times. I mean, they had their arguments between themselves, because my mother was wary of the occult. She was a Catholic convert. My father was also a convert to religion, but he pursued a more occult, more mystical path. So, he was the one introducing me to all these things. My mother was kind of wary of it. So I do remember, like, I was kind of dragged into their marital disputes sometimes,
Mhm.
um, because like I was his special daughter. My siblings did not express the interest in the occult. They remained Catholics their entire life, and it
Mhm.
just did not inherit it. So, like, one time my mother ordered me to give all the books back to my father, and she went over the books one by one, not knowing anything that's written in it,
Mhm.
just kind of trying to fulfill her parental duty, so that I like she was kind of afraid that my father would just make me crazy and impractical, and that I would, develop some mental illness, because he was kind of fragile.
Mhm.
He was a hypochondriac. So I guess she was trying to protect me from his influence, um, in a way, but I always got the books back. Like I would be sneaking back into, like his closet, and I would be smuggling the books back one by one, and my mother would never notice.
What is the kind of first aspect of occultism that really resonated with you? Was it tarot or astrology, or what was your kind of first love?
Probably astrology. Probably astrology, because I saw all these people, and some of them were like influential people in society who went for readings to get their horoscopes done from my father. So it was presented in an atmosphere of great reverence to me. Like like everybody took it seriously.
Yeah.
You know,
I wonder, like, was that kind of a result of the spiritual revival of the time, or was it more like a tradition in Prague and Czech
it was rare. It was rare at the time. You would have to have inherited from somebody in person, like through oral tradition, because there was nothing. The communists, they shut down all the lodges, all the spiritualist groups. There was very little literature. It just was only what was surviving from the pre-war era, and then the 1990s were a time of explosive liberty, where people were like so hungry for everything, from consumerism to partying, music, travel, but most of all, ideas. So all kinds of cults from the West have swarmed the country, and my parents were kind of devouring it. So like we had the Catholic rosary on Wednesday nights. Then we went to Zen Buddhist meditation on like Saturdays, and on Sundays we went to the Catholic mass. So yeah, I was exposed to a lot of spirituality. My parents were seekers, you could say. I guess they were seeking ways out of their own pain. And that's how I got introduced to it,
But so how did you find the left-hand path, or how did you?
Oh, the left-hand path.
Yeah.
The left-hand path kind of found me. So I was put into Catholic schools, Catholic Girl Scouts, Catholic parish stuff. I fucking hated it. I hated it. To me, it was like very emasculating. I didn't like the boys there at all. They seemed weak to me. Like, to me, Catholicism was kind of like an old lady thing. Like, with the women, yeah, they're obnoxious, but it did not trigger me so badly as like seeing the men there. And like where I come from, the churches are kind of full of women,
Yeah.
So there was this tension, because at this, I was exposed to occultism, but at the same time, I was put into all of these Catholic institutions to get a good education, or because it was believed that like that was the good environment for me to be. And my parents were not wrong. Like, the education was superb. It was classical. I was kind of sheltered almost from a lot of phenomena. Like, I have not seen drugs until I was 25. Like, I have physically not seen a joint of marijuana. I wasn't even wearing makeup. Like, I was very sheltered from the horrors of the consumerist capitalist society. Like I was taught to play 2 musical instruments, and I was taught Latin and Greek philosophy and history of arts. That's what I majored in. Then I went to study philosophy and theology on college. So it was like I was a part of some social caste that just did not even brush shoulders with the rest of the society. My life here now in Las Vegas is so different.
Yeah.
Like that Catholic college girl who was taught Latin and history of arts she is long gone, and she would be very useless here. She wouldn't make it, I'm telling you.
Yeah. So what so I mean, I've spoken to people who've said that Lucifer has literally spoken to them. You said the left-hand path picked you. Like,
It did
describe
pick
that.
me. Lucifer was actually speaking to me as a child. I
Uh-huh.
remember it vividly. And I knew
Mhm.
who he was. Like, I would not even say his name out of like fear and reverence, but he did introduce himself as the Prince of Darkness and the Prince of the powers of the air. And he kind of looked exactly like the later cinematic depictions of Lucifer that I have seen. He was kind of pale,
Mhm.
dark, ominous, very wise, attractive, but not sexual,
Mhm.
kind of like an older brother
Mhm.
figure who cares, who protects you. I actually turned to black magic as a teenager because of bullying for empowerment, and it was working, but I got scared. I got scared that I will lose my soul, and my heart will become blackened and I will lose the capacity to love. That was my fear. That's why I backed off from it. But it was always creeping back. In the end, I made friends with people who were left-hand path, who were like dark Nordic pagans.
Mhm.
I got my hands on a couple of grimoires that were being published in Scandinavian, very obscure kind of black metal
Mhm.
aesthetics, publishing houses, and I got sucked into it. And that's when I was like, oh my God, like it's real, like this is my spiritual home. The pull was just very strong. And I went through a number of traditions. I was with Wiccans, I was with the Druids, I did like Hermetic Kabbalah, I was with the Unitarians. Um, I got pretty deep in Haitian Voodoo, but in the end, like the Western demonology, Western occultist, the Latin path, that's what stuck with me. And I had to keep it secret, sort of, because even though I was publicly known as a witch and it was my profession, I wouldn't want my clients to know that this is what I actually do.
Mhm.
Like you could speak about paganism or the goddess or the practice of magic, but probably not about having pacts with demons.
So you have this shop in Prague, and people come in and they say, "Oh, there's like the nice, friendly neighborhood witch," and then
Yeah, sort
you're
of.
in the
Yeah.
basement, like you know, with packs to the devil and stuff.
Almost. But we
Yeah.
kind of moved into the sinister current later on. I mean, the
Mhm.
studio is still there. It's beautiful. It's very like tasteful. It sort of pays homage to the history of Prague.
Mhm.
Like the decor is all 1600s, 1700s. There's like statues of gods. There's nothing overly sinister there because you don't
Mhm.
want to make the clients uncomfortable. But yeah, like the ceremonies that took place there, they were getting progressively darker
Mhm.
because that's just where the path has uh has led us. And in the end, we were sought out by people who came with very dark stories.
Mhm.
Like they were there to solve real trouble, not to indulge in like, I think a lot of new age spirituality is indulgence, honestly.
Mhm.
It's pipe dreams, it's escapism. People who seek out witches, like professional witches, they usually have a very compelling reason to. Like they
Mhm.
have exhausted the options, the regular options to resolve their issues. So when they would come to us, they would come with like a serious dilemma, serious life situation, and then
Mhm.
they would be open to trying whatever we would come up with.
Yeah, I had kind of a similar situation where like I had some things come up in my life, and I was speaking to some like root workers and card readers and stuff, who I knew personally, and they started giving me advice and looking at my cards and that sort of thing. And when I started seeing kind of like the more mundane applications, like getting a job or whatever, work out, that kind of like clicked in my mind wow, we all are connected in this really weird big way. And it's like through this kind of materialistic need of mine, it created a more spiritual
It's true. I mean,
perspective.
not everybody will start practicing spirituality, but it's always easier to work with people who do, who are open to it, because they don't demand that you do the work for them, which is not even always possible. Like you cannot pay people to pray mantras for you all day long to wipe out your bad karma if you were the black magician in the past. Like you gotta face it yourself,
Yeah.
at least through some sort of ritualized drama, like you have to address it. We can facilitate it for you, but you have to be willing to put yourself into it at the very least as an active observer, as a witness. Because of course there's a difference between priesthood and laity. Laiks don't have the skills, and they shouldn't even be getting into practical magic, but they need to be participant in it. What always got me was like how many services are offered online where people literally just expect that they will send money somewhere and like poof, magic.
Yeah, it's at the very least it's really really just asking to be abused. Like it's
they
bizarre.
kind of are putting themselves out there to be scammed, but it's a demand and offer situation. I mean, you could criticize the charlatans just as easily as you could criticize, I guess, the clients, because sometimes people are really dumb and they're asking for it.
Right. So are there any like particular teachers or authors that have influenced you, or are you kind of
many. I mean,
like who would you
sadly my mentors are dead for the most part, and they were not that old, they just lived a dark life, so it got to them, I guess. I'm not gonna name them. One of them was a Haitian Voodoo Freemason spiritualist from southern United States. The other was actually also from the South. He was like a paranormal researcher, writer, alchemist. But I've been learning from other practitioners, like brothers and sisters, sort of mutually in recent years. And my associates, we have conducted a lot of channeled sessions, rituals together. If I were to name one influence, like name drop, that would probably E.A. Coating, first published by Ixaxar in the 2000s. I came across the book Baneful Magic in 2009, which was, and I believe still is, like the only printed book out there that discusses the use of black magic, like as black magic, to cause devastation, and
What's
like
the name of that
defends
book?
it and gives and gives the instructions to do so. So that really shook me, and I came into possession of that book randomly. Somebody gave it to me to sell it on eBay, and I read it before I did.
What was that book again?
Baneful Magic.
Okay. I'm writing it down. Yeah, so I mean, I guess what I'm asking is like, it sounds like for the most part, you can't just learn this from a book. Like you really need to be
Some
part
people
of it.
have gotten a lot from the books, but you need to move away from them at some point. And I believe you have to move to kind of reading the signs and drawing more from your own practice or from joint practice with other people.
And so you mentioned the late 80s spiritual revival and in Prague. And are you seeing something similar in the United States these days?
I wasn't there. It's so hard to judge, back then the system was crumbling from within, and it was not oppressing people as badly as it used to. So the Catholic Church was able to have some like great festivals attended by thousands of people. And this gave people a sense of like hope, or, like the times are changing, like the song from Scorpions, The Winds of Change. It was a particular atmosphere at the particular time. And like, let me tell you, enjoy the times of great hope and great promise, because they have always turned into times of great darkness and despair. And like I lived through it. I believed all of it, like, oh, European Union is the best thing ever, and freedom and democracy, and then the war on terror came, and other things came. And I guess by the time the SWAT teams were busting through the doors to crack on illegal parties last year, even the less perceptive among us have realized that the promises of freedom and democracy have not exactly been fulfilled.
Yeah. So were you at any events that were busted up like that? Have you seen that firsthand?
I knew people who were like, it was my impression actually that these events are medialized and or even staged to cause fear in the population.
Yeah.
There was a person who shot himself in front of a government building, the Ministry of Healthcare, because his wife was denied effective treatment of COVID. And he believed that they basically killed her. So he came to shoot himself in front of the Ministry of Healthcare, and people brought in a mass mountain of candles there, and posters and flowers. It was bulldozed within hours.
Oh wow.
So like I have seen things that frankly you could draw one-to-one parallels to oppressive regimes in the past. I don't think a great many people have expected that they would see this again in their lifetime, but we are seeing the same things. We are seeing people kind of martyred who stood up against the state. We are seeing heavy censorship, manipulation of media. And like my ancestors, they are kind of used to being treated poorly because we were always occupied by some foreign force. We are a very small country. So people just kind of badger in their hole, and they're gonna drink beer and complain in the pub, and they don't trust the man above them. They're skeptical, so they're just gonna survive. They have a certain form of resilience in them, and this resilience is connected to the skepticism. My people, they're very negativistic. Like, they're the opposite of Americans. Like, American friends, anytime you will tell them about some entrepreneurial idea you have, everybody's gonna be like, you're gonna be rich and famous. whereas the Czechs would be like, really, you think this is gonna fly? So like for the ambitious and the adventure seekers, my country was always too small and too small-minded. But it's been a very popular destination for the expatriates, people from the West who grew disillusioned with their countries. There is like a sizable, like 100,000 people, sizable community of expatriates in Prague who have sort of outpriced the locals, which is, that's the tragedy of it. People come there to live a good life, but they ruin it for the locals.
Right. Yeah. And
we can't compete with some elite programmers who are working for a company in London or New York, remotely, and they don't mind if they pay $1,500 a month for a studio apartment. $1,500 used to be the monthly budget for my entire family when I was growing up.
And you've mentioned, and I've heard you other interviews talk about past lives, and that being a really big part of your practice. And I was wondering if you could kind of talk about that a little bit.
Well, I came across it sort of randomly because I basically exhausted my theories and my options when I was looking for ways how to break curses, how to break through blockages that I was seeing in my life and also in the lives of my clients. So, logically, you go back to childhood, you go back to explore what you were raised with. You can recondition yourself, you can look into ancestral trauma. But then what if you have gone through all of this and it still hasn't been resolved? So the only logical conclusion that came from there was like, okay, well then it must be coming from past lives, because it appears that some people are just born with this. Their families were entirely fine, nice, and yet they wanted to kill themselves when they were 8 years old. They were seeing execution sites and mass graves in their nightmares as children. They were being haunted. I have seen entire families who are like haunted. So that's how I started putting it together, and I came to this inevitable conclusion that not only our deeds follow us, guilt, promises, oaths, but magic follows us big time. So there is not just the magic that we do now, but magic that was done before, and that could have been way more powerful. You could have been a more powerful person that you are now. So you're kind of being dragged by this momentum that you have created for yourself before. And if you don't know who you are, and you look at yourself just from the perspective of here and now, and you fall into thinking that like you're a victim, that you deserve better, then you will never find the answers in life. It's like, it's this tip of the iceberg, who you are now. And of course, I'm not saying that people need to dig into the past. If they don't need to dig into it, if they have their answers and their solutions without doing it, they don't have to do it, don't do it just for entertainment. Right. Or out of curiosity. There has to be a compelling reason. But I started as a regular fortune teller psychic, telling people about the future. When I read for people now, I mostly see the past. I tell them stories about their past.
Do you, as someone who's seen both directions, do you perceive of time as linear? Do you think that?
No, it's kind of circular. It's constantly evolving. Like, you can change those stories, you can change your perspective of them, and that bleeds into the present, and you can condition the future. It's one and the same thing, really. Like, you are a continuum. It's a simplistic view to look at it, like past, present, future, but it's just kind of easier for our mind to picture it this way. But it's all constantly evolving. It's alive.
And I mean, do you take, like, when you talk about a past life, do you take it, how literally do you take it? Like, I could see a possibility where past lives, where you can work with somebody and help them see their past life.
Well, you don't have to take it literally. You don't even have to believe in it if you're not so inclined.
It could be a powerful metaphor, I think I'm trying to say.
You can work with it as a story, as a symbol, just like you would do with dream interpretation and a psychologist. These are images. The regression therapy was actually discovered randomly when people underwent regression into childhood, because that's what psychoanalysis came up with. They looked for the cause of everything in childhood, or like in your parents, in the ancestral trauma. But then people came into those offices who had, like, typically a fear or an anxiety of very specific nature, like fear of drowning, like they couldn't swim. So they were taken into a regression, but nothing was found there. They didn't drown. They didn't witness their sibling drown. It was not conditioned to them by their mother. But what appeared, if they were put on the regression, is they would they would come up with some memory as if seemingly dying in a naval battle, or perhaps being drowned and murdered. And what was discovered is that you can work with these seemingly past life memories the same way you would work with any recovered memories coming from this life, from childhood. So, and you can work with memories of your ancestors, which are passed on to you through bloodline. I've run into those as well. Like you can heal your bloodlines. That is a known practice in many civilizations. So, for as long as it works, why not use it? I've seen it work over and over. People, and a lot of time it even suffices for people to like hear the story or see the story. It gives them an explanation. It relieves them. You can invite forgiveness, forgive yourself for bad choices or the people who killed you. Past life regression is kind of notorious for bringing up experiences of premature death for most part, or other highly violent, traumatic events like false imprisonment or betrayal. That's kind of what sticks with us, and that's what we seek to address and understand, and that it explains our relationships to certain people. Like, sometimes you will be just like overcome by hatred or spite or just something towards a person that you don't even, like you don't even know them that much. And it's because you recognize each other on an energetic level. So a lot of people, they come because of anxieties, because they have fragments of memories and they want to put it together, or because their lives just seem to be cursed and they don't know why, or because they have some very weird connection to another person that they can't explain, and they want to know like what is between them. Like there are people in my life who I have met only once 15 years ago for 3 hours, and we still have this fascination with each other, this pull. Like I blocked him several times. We have arranged to meet several times. It never happened. And like, yet we keep being pulled together because there is some resonance on soul level. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why would it still be renewing itself? So we study these soul contracts, these soul ties, these bonds, because we are connected.
I've done I've spoken to people who have been in relationships with therapists that are kind of similar to what you're describing, except extremely abusive, and led them to believe things about their past that didn't happen.
I mean, I always seek to empower people, but I know that you can get into cults or like gurus, and they can really mess with your mind. They can abuse even their legitimate skills. They can create narratives that fit them, and then before you even count to 10, they're going to be bedding your wife and pimping your daughter and deciding who in the cults gets to marry whom, and it just becomes the same thing always.
Yeah. Have you seen, I guess the temptation for somebody with power in a relationship is always, there's always like the possibility that they could be tempted to abuse it. And what you're describing is really powerful, helping somebody literally.
I don't see the people, it's not a relationship really. Like I mostly see them once, and then I see them in a couple of years again, if ever. So it's not like a therapy where you enter into a contract and it's long term and the person really has access to you. I am more like an oracle that people come to consult on some kind of crossroads in their life, and so I spill the beans fully. I know that I may not be able to see them ever again, so I just tell them all that I see, I kind of try to sell them on it. 90% of the time they agree, they feel it, they start crying, that they know. Few times a year it happens that somebody just doesn't want to listen. Like, you can tell them over and over the same thing, and they just won't listen. So, I did my job. Maybe you will start thinking about it 10 years from now.
So I'm trying to think of a way to phrase this without sounding cheesy, but I'm very curious about your relationship with Lucifer and that part of your.
Oh, it's like a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
It's like an abusive marriage. It's from what I understand, we are like soul-bound and have been for centuries. So, like, he's not going anywhere. He's always been there. He will always be there. He kind of tends to embody himself in my life through men, powerful men who are often oppressive towards me in some way. So that's a point of contention.
Yeah.
He's also like a father figure in a sense. So can be strict, can be patronizing, but he's also like a provider. He always provides for his own. Yeah, we talk daily. Actually, I have gotten into a habit of channeling, and I record all of these sessions. Sometimes he comes in dreams. Sometimes he just drops like a one-liner, like an oracle on me, for me to determine. And he speaks to me through other people, especially certain people. People around me tend to get possessed, and it's kind of scary. That happens. That happens a lot. Like when you are so deep in a communion with a deity that you have like taken pacts, or you became their mortal consort, like a god spouse, then they really are your spouse. Like, they have the power over your life, and they have the duty to you, and you have the duty to them, and you just always have to come, like, you have to do this together because you have given your word. So it's a very specific way to live. I have to keep taboos in my life, like as if I were a member of the priesthood. I minister to others. That's kind of what I do. That's what my whole life revolves around and has for years. I'm also representing, I guess, certain current, and everything in my life goes back to it. Like, I don't have a civil life anymore. I guess I never had it, in a sense. Maybe when I was younger and I was still in college, or doing different hustles, different jobs, but in the recent years and the way that it has progressed, it's just taken hold over my life completely. And I sort of had to mature into it. Like, I had to get older because it's very serious business. I was asked to leave Europe. I was asked to emigrate. I'm being asked to do things, often dangerous things, like moves that you cannot really rationalize very well. So I live on blind faith, in a sense. Like, I am the agent of the Dark Lord in this world. I am on a mission.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much you can share, but being asked to do dangerous things, it sounds like there's a good story there.
Oh, there is a lot of good stories, but not necessarily of the entertaining kind. Like, I came here last year in July for love, and I got married in September, and it's not even my 1-year wedding anniversary, and the marriage fell apart by winter time.
Because of
so I took a big risk. I had my visa run out, and My husband turned out to be abusive, and he kicked me out on the street in freezing temperatures with no health insurance, no car, no driver's license, no money, no job, no employment visa. And I've been trying to recover from that ever since. So that's what I'm calling dangerous choices. Like, you go on blind faith, and it's not like people think like you're gonna make a pact with the devil and you're gonna be rich and famous. Well, yeah, maybe later on. Who knows? It's not what I asked for anyway. So I can't complain about not having it. And since it is a lifetime thing, you're just asked to do your part, and then at some point, the other party will deliver as well, but you can't drop the ball.
Is it a lifetime thing, or is it a many lifetimes thing?
It is a many lifetime things. Like, you can take a sabbatical away from it, but I was shown very particular visions where Lucifer himself was like showing me this throne of his in different cultures, different times, and he was showing me I was always there. Don't even think that you can live without me, because I was always here. So, of course, not always you're like a consciously practicing occultist. You might be something else, but you are still serving that agenda.
So there's kind of, like, roughly speaking, 2 or 3 types of people that listen to this show or watch this live stream. And one of those is like Christian conspiracy theorists who are going to go ape shit because I'm talking to you. And the other is like non-theistic Satanists. So like the Satanic Temple people who like, what do each of those groups kind of get wrong about Lucifer in your mind? Maybe not a short, quick answer to that, but
I'm sure I would get on board with both of these groups on many things. I mean, if we spoke about, I guess, our take on liberties, that would be a great common ground. But the whole non-theistic Satanism thing to me is like very weird. Like, if somebody were to tell me that like they don't believe in spirits and deities, that it's just like an archetype, or it's just, for them it's like a philosophy or like a fashion statement almost in some cases, I'm like, yo, like, I don't know what to say. Like, I have objects moving in my room when I do ritual. To me, I respect the choice not to worship spirits or even work with them, because not all magicians do. Some magicians believe that you should not be entering into contracts with spirits. You should always command them either, or just manifest out of your own will, or perhaps using natural magic, or elements or astrological powers. So that's like, to me, that's a fair choice. There is definitely a big downside in getting into the whole spirit politics. So I just kind of feel weird when people say that it's not even real. To me, that's dumbass. Like, do you think that generations of people in all cultures all across the world were wrong and you're the smart lass? No, you're not. Come on, like, all the temples all around the world were not built because those people were dumbasses and you figured out. With the Christians, like the right-wing conspiracy theories, people who are into that sort of thing, they're good people a lot of times. And a lot of times they actually seek the esoteric, occult interpretation of reality. Like, they want to look beneath the surface, which is something that I appreciate greatly. I don't think you can call yourself an esotericist or an occultist if you're buying into all the propaganda BS. Like, come on. And this is something that has drawn very new lines in the spiritual community in recent years, because a lot of people, they just shown themselves to be so gullible, and that they don't even stand for any values. So it made me question many people's lifetime of work. It's like, if you can fall for any propaganda that they put out there, if you don't even believe in, basic liberty and human rights, then how can you possibly be an occultist, like an initiate of the inner truth? So, there's many lines drawn, and they sort of always intermingle. I was surrounded by like Brexit people, Trump supporters, for a number of years. Like we all saw some kind of hope to overturn this decline of Western civilization. Of course, that has not happened. My husband was a big time conspiracy freak, but in his case, what I saw was mental decline as a result of engaging in these narratives. Because I think if you wake up every day with anxiety, then you lose your mind over what's being written on Facebook. And it demoralizes you to the point that you're incapable of performing your everyday duties. That's not a good path in life, like you're just engaging in a form of mental masturbation. Forgive me the verbiage, but like it's not healthy to fill your mind with apocalyptic scenarios if you see yourself as totally powerless to face them. So in a way, I was kind of glad later on, after he kicked me out, after I fled, because just a few weeks later, I was like, where are the black helicopters? They're not coming from me. How is this possible? I thought it was going to happen any day when I was with him, and now nothing's happening. And I'm like, was it all just in his head? Is reality even objective when it can change so drastically according to who you listen to every day? It's like I stopped following the news because I frankly had too much to deal with in my real life. And I don't miss watching the news. It was not helping me to succeed in life. It was entertaining me. It was satisfying my need to, probe deeper. But in the end, it's all just drama. And I have seen so many waves of this drama that I'm like, what's the next thing? You can shove it. I'm not interested. Like, are we going to be bombarded by motorized grizzly bears from the sky? I'm sure they can manufacture anything with the news. Or is there another heat wave coming? Or are we going to be poisoned? Like, is China about to attack us? Or are we going to freeze to death over winter because of gas prices? I don't have the energy to follow it anymore.
Oh, sure. And I mean, what came really clear to me after living through 2020 up until today is that if the media and the organizations that should be doing something about the problem is not going to even address solutions, but are going to bombard you with the problems, and we're, as a species or as a race or however you want to say it, we're dealing with some real, existence threatening problems.
It's just gonna break your spirit, it's
make
like
it crazy.
it's like psychological torture.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. So I mean, I totally agree with you there. I did hear on an interview with you that you mentioned, I think you used the term like a karmic reset. You said something about Lucifer
Karmic
coming.
reset.
Yeah,
Well, that's what I'm being promised, but it could be the bluff. Lucifer is the Lord of Lies. I have never run into any other deity that lies so much.
Like, well, explain that concept.
It's 50% disinformation. It's hilarious. Like, I sometimes record these messages, like I laugh at it because, like, but it is not forbidden by the universal laws. Spirits can lie. I think angels can lie too.
I think so. But what did he mean? Karmic reset. I was really curious. That's
I think what it means is that your momentum is reaching some kind of critical phase, or basically it doesn't lead anywhere from here. It just needs to crash. It's like the economy, it doesn't lead anywhere from now on. Like, we can't be printing that money forever. It will have to have a reset of some sort. And you can have this also as an individual. Like, maybe you have, maybe there is too much magic influencing your life. Maybe there's some time travel paradox, or just something that is creating tremendous pressure, and there has to be a reset. My life currently is in that state. My life is currently in the state where, no matter how I think about it, other than some miracle, some deus ex machina, some external intervention, I can't dig myself out of this hole. Like, there's no way how I'm gonna even save up money for divorce, immigration attorney, place of my own, other than through intervention. Something needs to reset, because this path that I've been on, it just doesn't progress from here. And yet, like, I know that I will live. Like, people have seen me as an old woman, so I know that it doesn't end physically, but it will have to end as this particular version of reality, as this timeline. Obviously I'm not gonna grow old living in a cheap hotel in Las Vegas.
No one wants that. Well, thanks so much for talking to me. Before we sign off here, do you have any idea what might be in our future? Keeping in mind that Lucifer might be lying.
Yeah. Oh my God. I would not quote his prophecies, certainly, because I don't believe them. Well, look for the signs. The whole universe speaks to you through symbols. Like, look at what is printed on your t-shirt and analyze it. If you want to look for signs, look in the mirror first. Thank you, Lenny.
Oh, thank you so much. And
thanks for having me. And anybody who wants to, chat with me, I'm on all social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, on a regular basis. So let me know what you think, and you can read my stuff or view my artwork. I will be glad if I capture your attention.
All right. Ended the